Hi, I'm Old Norse Specialist Jackson Crawford, and I am back today with my distinguished friend, Captain Luke Amadeus Ranieri of the YouTube channel Scorpio Martianus and Polymathy.
Good to be here.
Well, I hope you'll check out these channels. Today, what we're going to do is, it's actually made a little bit of an exchange between our two channels, giving introductions to the languages that we work with for people who are perhaps interested in engaging with them, have maybe a little bit of background with studying languages, but don't quite know what they're getting into with some of these different languages. So on my channel, we'll talk about some of the languages I mostly deal with, and on your channel, some languages you mostly deal with.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah. So in this one, we were going to look at the modern Scandinavian languages, what it might be like for someone to approach learning one of them.
Especially since I haven't really studied them except very superficially.
Sure.
Yeah,
So you get to be the straight man for my performance here.
that's correct.
All right. So what would you want to know as someone who's familiar with a fair number of languages, approaching Scandinavian language, maybe not even sure which one you might be interested in?
Well, that is a good and tough question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I assume one or the other might be harder, at least at the beginning, to learn, right?
Well, if we're talking about Icelandic, that is certainly, of the modern spoken languages that are standard languages of a country with a flag and cities, Icelandic is the hardest. I make all of those extra caveats because there are some dialects on the continent that can be about as hard as Icelandic, but they're not a standard language.
Are they more conservative, some of them?
Yeah, not the kind of language you would go to Stockholm and speak.
Why do we think that languages with a case system have to be hard?
Yeah, well, but they are for English speakers often,
Yeah,
right?
they are.
I mean, for example, in Icelandic, take the verb take. Simple example. Taka is the infinitive, right? The dictionary form you would find. But in the present tense, we have ég tek, I take, þú tekur, you take, hann tekur, he takes, so that's the same. Við tökum, we take.
Okay, with the gum.
Þið takið, y'all take.
Mm-hmm.
And then þeir taka, they take. So we have 5 different forms in the present. In one of the languages on the continent, let's take Norwegian bokmål. That would instead be jeg tar, I take, du tar, you take, han tar, he takes, vi tar, we take, der tar, y'all take, de tar, they take.
Yeah,
Right. So
totally flattened out the whole
just
paradigm.
completely, right? So
Just different by tense, but not by person.
Yep. In the standard languages on the continent, there is no distinction in the verb between singular and present, or between any of the persons. We just have a present form, a past form, a participial form, and an infinitive.
Very and yet slightly simpler than English, which at least has a difference in the present tense for the third person singular.
Yeah, I would say the verb is more simplified in Norwegian, Swedish, Danish than in English.
And that's interesting because those languages, along with Icelandic, all came from the same source, but some are radically simplified, and at least in that respect.
Yeah, in say 1200, all of these languages were as complicated as Icelandic. They've lost a ton of verbal inflection in that time, and nominal inflection as well.
Yeah.
The noun is also, you have one singular form and one plural form on the continent, just like in English.
Right.
Now that can vary in difficulty a little bit. So again, if you're looking at Icelandic, you have to know, is it masculine, is it feminine, is it neuter, what stem is it, right? Even masculines might have IR plurals versus AR plurals versus umlaut plurals. A little bit complicated. On the continent, you have kind of different levels. Swedish is the most complicated of the continental languages.
Really?
You still have,
How?
you still have residue of different stem classes.
Okay.
So, for instance, Old Norse I stems still have a plural in ER, whereas other masculines typically have a plural in AR. So that's a residue of that older complexity. Versus the simplest in this respect on the continent is Norwegian bokmål, where the plural of almost everything is just add ER to it, right? Which is schwa R.
Yeah.
Right. There are still some neuter nouns that have no inflected plural. So et ship, a ship, but then plural ship. That's a residue of Old Norse too, but yeah, Norwegian bookmall is radically simplified in that respect.
Interesting.
And then Danish, somewhere in between.
And that's the articulated form. Just ship is the ship, or is that
Ship is plural. It's also singular.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
It's like sheep.
right?
Right.
Huh.
Yeah, a sheep, but also many sheep.
Yeah.
Et ship, but also manga ship.
Huh.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So, okay, so we have 4 of them. Now, we might have different goals. I know for myself, I want to eventually, and with your help, I believe, learn Old Norse properly and to a somewhat fluent reading level, I hope.
Okay. Yeah.
Sometime in the future, when I get done with Latin and Greek. So what I would want to know then, so that's my goal. So I might assume then that I should go for the nearest living language, which is Icelandic. But that might not be true for a lot of people. They might actually benefit from, if they want to make that leap to Old Norse, going through one of the other mainland languages first. What do you think about that?
It depends so much on what particular most interests you. So if you're really into runes, right, if that's what fascinates you, you want to get into all of the lore of rune stones and go visit rune stones, I'd say Swedish. The vast majority of rune stones are in Sweden. And so the vast majority of literature on them is in Swedish. So
cool.
I would go with Swedish in that case.
That's a good point.
If you just want conversational proficiency for travel and you would like to be able to use your Scandinavian language conversation skills in a maximum number of Scandinavian countries, I would say Norwegian Bokmål, because it's readily understood in Norway, obviously, but also very understandable to Swedes and to Danes. So Swedish, Norwegian, Danish are all reasonably mutually intelligible. This can get exaggerated both ways, with people claiming, oh, they're totally different, or people claiming, oh, they're completely the same. They're not either, but if you learn one, it's very easy to understand the others, especially in writing. The hardest jump to make is Danish to the other two, because Danish pronunciation is so different.
Just for its phonology?
Yeah, the phonology is so
Because the
different.
spelling, I assume, is relatively similar.
Spelling, very similar. Danish is incredibly easy to read if you speak Norwegian. But if you first hear it and you've never heard Danish, what the hell am I hearing?
Right. Kind of like English compared to some other Germanic languages. If you want to go to, I don't know, a Proto-German or a Gothic or something.
Sure.
It's
Well,
more radically different.
And I'm not making fun of Danish. I mean, all the Scandinavian language speakers make fun of all the other languages, but Danish is radically different because it is the st,
Yeah.
right, that glottal catch. So there's a big phonological gap between Danish vis-a-vis Norwegian and Swedish. But no matter which of the three you learn, you can read the others very easily. And again, if you're just going for like a compromised spoken form, Norwegian Bokmål would be a good place to go with that. Personally, my most conversant, most proficient continental Scandinavian language is Norwegian Nynorsk. Right? So this is based on, Norwegian Bokmål is more or less written Danish as compromised over about 150 years with upper class spoken Norwegian. Norwegian Nynorsk is constructed in the mid-19th century, mid-1800s, by a linguist named Ivar Olsen as an average on the spoken Norwegian dialects. Both Norwegian Bokmål and Norwegian Nynorsk are legally equal in Norwegian. I have a whole video about this that I'll show you on the screen, so you can go look for this whole story if you want. Norwegian Nynorsk is, however, a minority choice. About 17% of people use Nynorsk rather than Bokmål, but it's what I use. You will not find a lot of resources in English for Norwegian Nynorsk. In fact, you'll find basically none. But, you know, I would say if you're really interested in Western Norway in particular and getting into the cultural and literary life of Western Norway, that's where Nynorsk would be your choice. Danish, of course, is, if you know German, probably a little bit easier. It's phonologically got some characteristics in common with German. And of course, it's the German border. And if you're a historian, you might be more interested in Danish because Denmark is traditionally sort of the hegemon of the North, right? When the three came under one crown, it was a Danish crown. Danish is also in use in Greenland and to some extent in the Faroe Islands. And the Faroe Islands have their own Scandinavian language,
Faroese.
Faroese, which is incredibly different in spoken form from any of the others. Not mutually intelligible with any of them, although in writing, pretty readable if you know Icelandic.
Yeah. Okay. I think for me then, it would be Norwegian or Icelandic for two similar or different reasons. Norwegian for the ease of it, relatively speaking. Icelandic to be that much closer to Old Norse.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think it's reasonable. Well, I hope that's been a halfway informative intro to what's out there in terms of Scandinavian languages. I'm also going to show some resources on screen for people who might be interested in one or the other. Just some places, just some books I recommend starting with if you want to get into them. And for now, from beautiful Colorado, we'll thank you for your time and wish you all the best.